Hello, this is Pastor Keith with another episode of Zion Plus for Zion Kids at Home. Today, I want to ask you and have you think a little bit about belonging. What belongs to you? And you have your own toys, you have your own clothes, you have your own shoes. So there's some things that belong to you. And then, who do you belong to? You belong to your parents. You belong to different uh, to your family. You belong to your brothers and sisters. There are different ways that we belong to one another. We are created when God created man. He made Adam, and the first time he said, all through the days of creation, he said he made something, and then he said it's good. Then he made something else, and he said it's good. And the first time he said it's not good was when he made Adam. And he made Adam, and Adam was alone. He didn't belong to anybody, didn't have anybody belonging to him. And God said, it's not good for man to be alone. And so he made the woman. And so Adam and Eve were together. They belonged to each other. And we all want to belong. Everybody wants to belong. We want to belong to the family. We want to belong to a circle of friends. We want to belong because that's the way God made us. We have trouble with that sometimes. Sometimes we feel like we're left out, like nobody likes us, like we don't belong, we don't fit, we're different. Sometimes when you go to if you've ever gone to a new school and walked into the room and you don't know anybody, you feel like, do I fit in here? Was anybody going to like me? Is it okay for me to be here? You feel like you don't belong, like that poor little duck feels like he doesn't belong. Well, it happens with us too. We feel like, well, all those other kids are having a good time and they like each other, and that they don't like me, and so I feel like I'm left out. We want to belong, and it hurts when we don't belong, but it's great when we find ways to belong. Some of the different things what are different places that we belong to? Well, one is that we can belong like to a choir. These are boys who have joined a boys choir, and they belong because they all look the same. Once you get into this choir, they make you wear the same robe. So they've got the white thing and the red deal, and they're holding red folders with their music in it because they belong, and they're all behaving the same, and they're all singing the same song, and so they're all together, and that makes them feel. And so these would be their friends. They would have fun together in the choir. So a choir is something that you can belong to. You dress the same and you sing the same. What about these guys? What do they belong to? Well, these are Boy Scouts, and they're leaders, and they know that they belong because they're all wearing the same uniform. They've got the same shirts and the same neckerchiefs, and they've got the same leaders. And these guys, they go on campouts together, and they do projects together. That's what it means to be a Boy Scout, is that you belong to your troop and to your patrol. Here's another one. What is this? Can you think of other ways that we belong? What other things, kind of things do we belong to? How about this one? What's that? Well, that's a soccer team. And so all the players on this soccer team, they wear the same uniforms. They've all got the blue uniform, and they're all lined up, and they all know which position they play. They play the same. They have the same coach, and they have the same strategy, and they have the same practices. So they do because they belong. They belong to each other. They belong to the team. What about this one? These are guys, and you can see all the ones in the front here all have instruments. A couple of trombones, look like there's some trumpets. I think I see a saxophone. And they're wearing the red and white stripes because they're in the band. So it's kind of like being in a choir, but they're wearing a band uniform or band shirt, and they're playing the same song, and they're on the same team. When you belong, you feel like you want to, like, you're for your family, you're for your school, you're for your team. You belong to that team, and you want it to succeed, and you want it to be the best, because that's part of who you are. So that's what these guys are doing, is they're playing the fight song at the, it looks like it's probably a basketball game or something, and they're trying to help their team on to victory. Here is a family reunion. When you have a family reunion, you get all the cousins and uncles and aunts and grandma and grandpa and the kids, everybody together. And this family, when they had their family reunion, they decided they'd all get red shirts. And so everybody that came, the ones from over there and the ones from over there and the ones from back there, they all got together wherever they came from, but they wore the same shirts. They want to be identified because we belong to each other and we are family. And that kind of belonging is important. And they all showed up and they all had their picnic together. And I think it looks like they were having a good time. Okay, now, when God sent Jesus into the world, the first one, Jesus began his ministry after he grew up. He went to the river and John the Baptist baptized him. And the Father's voice sounded at Jesus' baptism. Do you remember what it said? Have you ever heard this? The voice from heaven, the voice of God sounded from heaven, and it said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Okay? So God was saying, this man, this Jesus, he's my son. He belongs to me. He is mine, and I love him, and I'm happy about that. He is my beloved son. He's beloved, and I am well pleased. Okay? That's an amazing thing, that the Son belongs to the Father. The Son of God belongs to the Father. Jesus belongs to the Father. Now, Jesus made it so that we can belong to God. Because at the beginning, when Adam sinned, he was kicked out of the garden. He had to go away and he had to be separated from God. And sin comes between us and God. And we don't belong to God. We're his enemies. We're not his friends. We're sinners. We don't belong to him. We're not part of his family. We're part of his enemies. So how does God solve that? Well, Jesus went to the cross and his blood covered our sins. So God doesn't see our sins anymore. He sees the blood of Christ. God doesn't see us anymore as sinners. He sees his Son, who was perfect and never sinned in any way. And so that's what happens when we are baptized, when you are baptized, God says the same thing about you. He says, "This is Carl, and I love him, and I am pleased." And now Carl or Betty or Ruth or Joe, whoever it is, they belong to me. And when you're named by Christ in baptism, you belong to him. So when you belong to Jesus, do you get a shirt? Do you get a uniform? Do you get how did you know that you belong? Well, one way is you're marked with the water of baptism, but of course that dries off and nobody can see it anymore. So how do we know we belong? Are we supposed to wear a uniform or different clothes or something? We belong. See, here's some Christians in China, and they're gathered together and they're singing and they're praying to God through Jesus, and they are now part of your family. And when we have a family reunion in heaven someday, you'll get to meet these people. Will we all be wearing the same shirt? Will we all have the same uniform? I think we will all be singing the same song. We'll all be playing the same music, music of praise and honor and joy before God, who has given us salvation through his son Jesus. Now, there is one thing. So you have been bought. When we think of Christ on the cross, we remember that Jesus is the one who bought us. He paid for us. We used to be enemies, but he went and he paid for us. And now we belong to him by our baptism. And we also belong to one another. You have been bought with a price. Christ's blood on the cross paid for you, and now you belong to him. And so we belong to him, we belong to one another, and we're supposed to wear a uniform. What does the uniform that we wear look like? We're supposed to glorify God in our bodies. Yesterday in the sermon, pastors do quote the verse, you are not your own, you have been bought with a price, and so glorify God in your body. And that means you need to obey God. You need to turn away from the things he says to turn away from and do the things that he says to do. Here's a picture of somebody who belongs to God. This is from the story of the Good Samaritan. You may remember that story. The man that was going along, and he fell among thieves and robbers, and they beat him up, and they took all his money, and they left him for dead. But finally, the Samaritan came along, and he picked up the man, and he's putting medicine on his wounds. He's going to put him on top of his donkey over there and take him to a place where they can take care of him and help him get well. And he's not only going to do all that, he's going to pay for it himself. So that's what we do. That's what your uniform is. You don't have to wear a red shirt or a blue uniform, but you do have to show that you belong in the way that you behave. You belong to God. Jesus bought you with his blood on the cross, and now you are not your own. So glorify God in your body. Well, that's it for today's episode of Zion Plus. Thanks for listening.